Well, just about that, Jung said, he goes, in times of collective psychosis, only one thing will help us. And he says a new symbolic idea.
Mm.
And that's what this idea of Wetiko, the mind virus, or the quantum, or the reality of the psyche is. It's a new symbolic idea that literally like opens up our talk about being visionaries, our visionary capacity, and unlocks our creativity.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blue Hour podcast, where we explore the minds and the worlds of visionary artists and creators. I'm very excited for this week's guest, Paul Levy. He's an author that I've read before, and I had the chance to finally sit down with him and discuss his theories, but also pick his mind on subjects that maybe have not been discussed in his previous interviews that are available online. And for those of you who don't know him, he is I guess philosopher in the roots, but also a deep seeker that has had very profoundly transforming mystical experiences in his youth, and that has transformed him forever, and he wrote extensively about it. But his research has brought him to the ideas that have already existed in different traditions. So he puts them together with his own experience in the books on the Wetiko. So we're going to discuss this. He's also a public speaker, and he's a deep, meditator, that he's been doing meditation for many years. So the depths of his insights are so valuable, and if you have any spiritual inclination, you're going to feel the potency of what his words mean and what he's saying. On another hand, we have the Visionary Rose Gift that's now available to you guys. It's free to apply if you're an artist, visionary, and you have a deep connection with your art, not just something external, but you have a deep inner connection with what you're creating. This grant is for you. You can win money, you can win a grant, you have some Astro Tarot mentorship that's included if you win, and it's free to apply, so I'll put the link below. And finally, it's fall, so sweater season. We have these beautiful sweaters that are now available on our website in 2 colors, oversized, drop shoulder, high quality, with the embroidered Rosenbra logo and the Rosenbra text here. So these are available if you want to support the brand and the vision behind Rosenbra. Link is below. And let's jump right in.
Well, thanks for receiving me in your apartment, first of all.
Yeah, for sure. Totally.
I love doing this podcast when I'm immersed in the person's, environment. You were saying though, it's a new space for you too. Like
Yeah. Only been here about 6 months or so. Yeah.
That's maybe we can start with that. Like, it seems to be pretty interesting that in this aspect of your life, you say you had like an infestation in your last apartment and you were forced kind of out of it.
Yeah.
And it is a fresh start. So if you want to talk about that, but yeah, maybe talk about that to start, how you experienced this change in your environment that was very sudden and forced almost.
Yeah. No, it radically changed my life. It was the biggest crisis I ever had in my life, where I was living in a house for years, 24 years, and I was all set to buy it. But I was getting this horrible rash all over my body. And then days before taking ownership, I found out that the house was, infested with toxic mold. And, so, to make a long story short, I had to get rid of basically everything I've owned, and I had to do this twice. It was an unbelievable ordeal. And what really helped me was the awareness of this being a dream. Like, if I wasn't awake to that, it was difficult enough, but I don't know how I would have managed to get through it, but I was just seeing, this is how the dream is manifesting, and let me just flow with that. And I'm just grateful now I've been here in this space. It's a brand new apartment building. I'm the first person in this apartment. Everything here is new. The rash is gone. And I have access now to my books. I have a little storage unit down the floor where all of my most important books that I've annotated for 40 plus years are there. And so anyways, I feel just so filled with gratitude to have, it was almost like a rite of passage And, but symbolically, it also felt like with the work I'm doing of trying to shed light on evil and darkness and trying to help people to, wake up to how to navigate that in their lives, in the world, in their own minds, it felt like, okay, this is not separate from that process. This was seemingly part of the deeper gestalt of that I was navigating, and, so I'm just grateful that I've been able to get through it and really even more deeply connect with my creative spirit. I'm writing a new book. It's what I was doing all day until you came. And,
What is the new book? Is it linked to what you experienced, or it kind of fits in? I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it's linked. I've written 3 books on the Wetiko mind virus. I've written a book on how quantum physics is the medicine for the Wetiko mind virus. And this new book is, according to Jung, who's pretty much the main person I study, he was of the opinion that the greatest discovery of the entire 20th century in the realm of psychology was what he called the reality of the psyche. He even famously was saying, as quantum physicists were like discovering quantum physics, he was like, they're fast coming across the reality of the psyche. The meaning is that the deepest, most real thing in the world is the psyche. And what he meant by the psyche was very expansive. And, so that's what the book is about. Because I feel like he was one of the great geniuses of all time, and he was so far ahead of his time. And what he was pointing at via his notion of the reality of the psyche, and what I was trying to bring forth with the revelation that is quantum physics and the Wetiko mind virus and this being a dream, it's all just different interconnected aspects of the same jewel.
So it's kind of the missing link that unites both realms together in a way?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it's the psychological correlate to the quantum revelation, which is really having to do in quantum physics. They, went into, what is the microstructure of matter? What are the building blocks? And they didn't find anything having to do with matter, but they found mind, they found consciousness. And you can think of the psychological correlate to that realization is the reality of the psyche. And, so they both kind of complement and complete each other, quantum physics or, the quantum and the reality of the psyche. And it really even helps more understand because I'm just a translator with this idea of a mind virus. That's not my idea. This has been in every spiritual tradition. They're pointing at this, and I'm just a modern person trying to, sort of translate this into a modern idiom because it's so profoundly important for us to understand what this idea of a mind virus is really about,
Yeah, especially it feels very relevant to our times as well. Like so much transitions.
Right.
And destruction of the old. Like I see a lot of paradigms necessarily needing to be dissolved and shifted. But then there needs to be innovation, because humanity has to continue and there has to be some new ideas that inhabit our psyches.
Yeah. Well, just about that, Jung said, he goes, in times of collective psychosis, only one thing will help us. And he says a new symbolic idea. And that's what this idea of Wetiko, the mind virus or the quantum or the reality of the psyche is. It's a new symbolic idea that literally opens up our talk about being visionaries or visionary capacity and unlocks our creativity.
Yeah, it does feel like that. Because to understand this concept, you have to open your mind so wide. And once it's open, it's almost like you see all the moving parts in it, which is all the aspects of the Wetiko. That's how I perceive what you're saying. It's such a vast concept that even in your book, you're talking about the psyche. You have to understand your psyche to understand this vast space that opens up through the acknowledgement of the Wetiko.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, the Wetiko is a psychic virus, and it's a parasite of the psyche. And if you don't have any understanding of your own mind, you're not going to have any clue of how to wrap your mind around, that the fact that there is a virus of the mind, but it's so amazing how, it's in the apocryphal text of the Bible. They call it the counterfeiting spirit. It's in every spiritual tradition and a lot of visionary artists. Philip K. Dick comes to mind as an example. He was completely tracking Wetiko. He didn't have the name. He called it the Black Iron Prison. But the way he describes the Black Iron Prison is 100% precisely a description of Wetiko.
And he was an artist.
Yeah, he was a total visionary artist. And he actually says, because Wetiko, it's in the apocryphal text, they call it the counterfeiting spirit. It's an impersonator. It tricks us, it fools us, it puts us on, so we unconsciously identify. It offers us a false version of ourselves. Oh, you're traumatized, you're wounded. And then if you're not awake in that moment and you take on and identify with its version of you, then it has you, So the thing is, this Wetiko has no creativity at all. It plugs into your unconscious creativity in a way that turns it against you and feeds its sinister agenda. So it's this mime. It's a master mime. It's an impersonator. And Philip K. Dick was saying this imitating, what is the phrase he uses? This mime stuff is the key to everything. That's a paraphrase, but he realized if we don't come to terms with this, and encoded in the mind virus is our creative genius. It's actually helping us to wake up. But if we don't recognize that, and then we just unconsciously become victimized by it, it will kill us. And that's what's playing out. This is the diagnosis for what's happening in the world. And I'm not just saying that, kind of making a joke. I'm going, no, this is what we are playing out in the world, the origin. Because what are mind virus? People who hear the idea of a mind virus think it's really woo-woo and new agey and kind of crazy. No, all that a mind virus means is that the source and the solution of the collective insanity that's playing out in our world is to be found within the psyche. That's a no-brainer. That's what a mind virus is. And so that's what my whole work is trying to help people to see. And I'm a work in progress like everyone. More and more I deepen my realization as I integrate my own unconscious shadow stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Like, I do feel like it is, because you're also blending this with quantum physics.
Yeah.
Almost like that. This discovery that has been there, but that you're kind of bringing awareness to through your work and study, seems that correlated with also quantum physics, that these kinds of surfacings, if I can say it this way, are happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
So you say quantum physics is the solution to this mind virus.
Yeah.
How does that play out?
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll give you an example. So just to create context, quantum physics came into our world, and into our minds about a century ago. And it was such a radical discovery that, it's going to take, people say, oh yeah, this is going to take a number of centuries to begin to, take online into the human mind. And in essence, before quantum physics came into the world, Newtonian physicists were thinking they were studying this external world that was separate from them, that existed objectively, and they were just passive observers. And then quantum physics comes along and it absolutely blows that notion out of the water. It empirically proved again and again that the idea of an objective world is just that, an idea. It has no correlate in reality. And even more than that, quantum physics proved that the act of observing this universe actually influences the universe observed, that the observer and the observed and the act of observation are all interconnected parts of one whole quantum system. That's the description of a dream. If you change your viewpoint in a dream, the dream instantaneously reflects back your change in viewpoint, because it is nothing other than a reflection of your own mind. So quantum physics, by showing the act of observation is creative, it like unlocks something in our minds. It's showing us that we aren't just separate observers passively witnessing this world, but via the act of perceiving this world and observing this world, we are concurrently co-creating the very universe that we're actually witnessing, but we're doing it in a way where we're casting a spell on ourselves. We're hypnotizing ourselves, because then we then think that the world is objective. And as soon, and one way to understand this, and this is so psychedelic, if you're in a night dream And quantum physics has proven, this is what my work is about, what my quantum physics book is about. It's literally proven that we're having a collective dream. But your typical quantum physicist isn't trained to, really take in that revelation. So one way of understanding what quantum physics is showing, in a dream, if you have a viewpoint, whatever the viewpoint is, say if in the dream you're like, thinking that the dream world you live in, this, say, looks just like this universe, is objective. Well, being that the dream is nothing other than a projection of your own mind, if you hold the viewpoint that this world is objective, the world will shapeshift and give you all the evidence confirming your viewpoint. And now you have confirmation. Now you have evidence. Oh, the world is objective because that's the way it's manifesting. So you get even more fixed in your viewpoint that if the world is objective. And the more you get fixed in that viewpoint, the more the world just mirrors back, confirming, giving you all the evidence and proving that viewpoint ad infinitum in a self-reinforcing feedback loop whose origin is within your own mind. And what I'm describing is you've hypnotized yourself. You've cast yourself under a spell. That's Wetiko. And that's what I'm trying to help people to see through, that illusion. Because then what happens, all of your creative genius becomes unlocked and you're able to express yourself creatively at each and every moment, So, and why I say that's the medicine for Wetiko, because Wetiko, it works through our unconscious blind spots. It works through the projective tendencies of the mind, because we're always projecting. And, think of this as a waking ink blot, like a night dream is an ink blot. And, if you project onto an ink blot like a butterfly, it's not like one moment you sort of project the butterfly and 2 moments later it appears. No, it's simultaneous, right? So the very moment we're projecting onto the waking ink blot, then it'll instantaneously reflect back, confirming our viewpoint. Mm-hmm. So we have gotten entranced in this world, thinking this world exists objectively separate from us. But there's another half of that. The other half is we then think if the world exists objectively, well, then I must be a subject. I must be an ego, right? That is in relationship to the object, which is the world. But here quantum physics is saying, no. There's no objective world. There's not even things that are like interacting. There's no separate anything. It's all one whole seamlessly interconnected quantum system, including us as the observer. When you see that and you realize there's nothing objective, what happened to the subject? If I'm a subject, I need an object to be in relationship to in order to be a subject. If there's no object, wait a second, then who am I? So the point is that quantum physics is literally promoting itself, I think, unwittingly to become a spiritual path because it's shedding light on who we are. So those two experiences, thinking the world exists objectively, and the second experience of thinking I exist as an ego in time, reciprocally reinforce each other. One illusion reinforces the other endlessly. That's samsara. That's the cyclic existence. That's where when we take on board into your mind what quantum physics is showing you, it can help to dispel that and to connect you with your true nature. And what is your true nature? It's such a cliche. Well, our true nature by its nature is creative. Mm-hmm. So when you realize your nature, you embody and express yourself creatively. And the more you do that, the deeper you realize your nature in a positive feedback loop that creates light upon light in a world of darkness. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to point out that quantum physics, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's this thing called terma, these hidden treasures. It's a real tradition. It's not just a fairy tale. The idea that there are these like spiritual treasures that are hidden within the multidimensional fabric of the universe. And right when they're needed, they're discovered. They're like alarm clocks that wake us up. And they're like keys that open locks or charms that break spells. And I point out that quantum physics is a modern day analog to a terma, that we have dreamed up quantum physics into the world and into our minds to help us to remember, to help us to wake up to the dreamlike nature.
Interesting. And I just want to point out also, since maybe like 100 years, people have started to talk about the fact that we're entering the age of Aquarius.
Right.
And Aquarius is the age of technology. And it has necessarily now, like it feels like all the old religions are dissipating. They're losing strength and power for the kind of religion that is science. The science, people abide only by silence and the rules of science.
Right.
And it feels like what you're saying is merging the scientific rationalism with the spiritual that
Exactly.
has been let go, and now it's kind of reuniting where they converge.
The opposites unite.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's very beautiful that you point this out, because I think for me, like, putting language around something invisible helps the collective integrate it.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. So, that's the magic of language. It's not just descriptive, it's creative, you know?
And so bringing this kind of abstract science of quantum physics that people are like, oh, we've heard about it. Like, it's something we can't understand. That's all we know about it.
Right.
And the scientists are like, even us, we don't understand. We're coding stuff in this, supercomputer, and it gives us some probabilities of what's going on.
Yeah.
But bringing it back to like almost its philosophical implications is basically taking some abstract thing, putting it into a symbol, and then the symbol, you can see it, therefore integrate it, even though it's very profound, right? But it's a way of digesting it and bringing to the masses the wisdom of quantum physics.
Yeah, well, if I could just say one thing, like, with Einstein, he was one of the founders, but he could never fully embrace quantum physics because he was still, it's clear he was still attached to the notion, to the idea that this world existed objectively separate from us observing it. And, but he goes, yeah, quantum physics is so uncommonly important. It should be everyone's concern. So it's not just this complicated, abstract, theoretical, esoteric thing. No, this world is quantum through and through. And he was like intuiting that no, there is something unbelievably important in the gnosis, in the quantum gnosis. And, and for me, how I discovered this in my own life was in the early 1980s, 1981, I was in so much pain from this trauma. And the story isn't important, but I went so deeply inwards that I had a life-transforming spiritual awakening, and stuff began happening in my life, which was completely impossible. Like, not just synchronistic or magical, but it was like, according to how I understood the world, stuff that could only happen in dreams. And at that point, I was beginning to meet my teachers too. And particularly when I was around them, it was like the whole 3D space-time continuum just warped. And it's taken me 40 plus years to realize, I was having a revelation. Once I found the work of quantum physics, I began to realize, they're describing this universe I found myself in. So that's why I went so deeply into it. It was all based on my own experience.
Yeah, that's profound. And in that same vein, like, for people because I feel like there's different degrees of pain, and in a way, pain just highlights another trajectory. I feel like it's pushing something that is no longer working for you and showing you another direction. But in your own experience of that intense pain, how were you guided into this new trajectory?
Yeah. Well, what happened, one way of describing the pain without going into the story, it was like I had a direct, unmediated encounter with archetypal evil. And it completely destroyed my entire family. I haven't had a family for over 20 years. You know what I mean? I'm all good. I have a huge, soul family and group of friends. But, it was clear that it was either going to totally destroy me, or I was going to be forced to come to terms with what played out. So anything that spoke to the suffering, because the suffering was so intense, and I wasn't at all attached to whether it came from Buddhism or Christianity or this discipline or that, anything that in any way spoke to my suffering that could help me to alleviate it, even the slightest bit, I would study, I would pull that thread. And then over years and years of just doing that, then at a certain point, I began to realize I was weaving these disparate fields together in my own way that no one else had, just because it was coming from me. But the real motivation and incentive was I was so deeply traumatized by my experience of evil. And that's one of the real bases of my work, is the profound importance of shedding light on evil. That holographically encoded in evil, it's actually potentially helping us. But if we like split off from it, well, then we unwittingly offer ourselves into its hands, you know?
It does seem that that's what's going on. That's what's been going on. In my perspective, like even since the Freudian theories have become mainstream, even before they became mainstream back in 19th century, it feels like these theories of the unconscious have been weaponized against us. While before it felt like you could encounter your shadows more organically, because you were not born into a society that naturally casts a spell on you. I mean, to a certain extent, we've always had this spell, I think.
Yeah.
Since the Roman Empire, at least.
Yeah.
But it's harder than ever to awaken to the shadows without these types of discussions. You know, I feel like from birth, you were born into a society that consumes external stories through like Netflix, through this, that. And we don't understand the psychological impact of everything we consume. But like, just go in any place and eavesdrop into a conversation, you often start understanding what the collective is kind of repeating. Those kind of concepts of the dream they heard in a TV series that they're trying to replicate in their lives. But it's all this kind of self-repeating, cycle that makes us basically accept this reality as it is without the creative spark that makes us want to change it. In a way.
But it's like having a recurring dream. Just like, if, you're not getting the message from a dream, it'll just recur again and again in more amplified form until you get it. And in a way, this is a recurring iteration of the same fractal that played out in the Roman Empire, or in time of empire, that's one of the things I circle back to again and again and again in my work with this mind virus, with the Wetiko mind virus, is the solution is being creative, because what does the mind virus do? To the extent that you're not creative, it plugs into your creativity and it turns it against you, but yet if you actually consciously are able to access your own creative spirit, that's kryptonite to the mind virus. It has no power, Yeah.
And so many spiritual traditions, this creative spark comes from the heart, and it is love being kind of the ultimate, the most potent and dense form of creative power is love, because love is without the kind of superficial understanding of it, I see it as the opposite of the mind virus, which tries to infiltrate you, to use your energy and give it to the void. It's the opposite. It will use the opposite direction and use this energy outwardly to help others and help, like you're doing with your books, help others unlock their creative potential.
Well, one of the ways of really the essence of the mind virus is, when we think we exist as a separate self. And as soon as I think I'm a separate self, you're an other. As soon as you're an other, there's fear, and fear is the superfood for the mind virus, for Wetiko, So the idea of when you actually think about you're in a dream and you wake up in the dream and you have a lucid dream, what do you realize? Well, all the dream characters in the dream, they're aspects of me. We're not separate. And the energetic, expression of that realization is love, is compassion. And then you're just there to want to be in service, because by helping other people, you're ultimately helping yourself because you're not separate. You see, so that's where the separate self is really the essence of the mind virus.
It's funny, I just finished, have you seen the TV series Lost?
No.
It was in 2008, I think it started. It's pretty old, but they just recently put it back on Netflix. And the timing of it is very weird, because this whole series is a huge one. There must be 100 episodes over 6 years of seasons, 6 seasons. But I started to watch it in 2008, and I got drawn to it because it's all about mysteries. Every episode, there's a mystery, and it's very occult. There's some, the number 108 always comes back, which in Tibetan Buddhism is a very significant number. Yeah. There's some hieroglyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs. So there's this mysteries that I know is encoded in the story itself by the producer of the show. Back then I didn't know. I was just attracted to mysteries, but now I know how to read through it. the storyline is like every time I watch an episode, I was thinking about the Wetiko because I was reading your book at the same time. And basically the premise of the show is a plane crash on an island. And then there's all these weird things that happen on the island. But basically it's all a metaphor. So I don't know, if you've not watched it and you want to watch it, don't skip this segment because I might spoil it, but that's my interpretation. It's not said directly, but the island becomes a metaphor for the unconscious potential of these passengers on the plane. So they come from the real world, the tangible world, and they land into the unconscious realm where their karmas are unfolding. So basically the parallel, because they show the story of the people on the regular place and then on the subconscious planes, and they kind of exist simultaneously living lives. But in the subconscious realm, in this special island, they're forced to play out their karmas, their creative power, basically, because in the regular world, they are like sleeping, you know, they go to work 9 to 5 and they do their regular things, but they don't play out their karmas. Therefore, they're bound to the cycle of reincarnation, repeating the same thing over and over.
Right.
But what spoke this thought in my mind is when you said the conception that you are something and then there's another. They play with these words in the series. They land and then they find out there's others. Right. And instantly fear. The whole storyline starts to play with them versus the others. And you find out, they're actually not bad, but they, like a typical Hollywood movie, but they add all the symbolic mysteries of it actually encoded in like if you were to look at the script with the notes of the producer, you would see that he's actually probably taking scriptures from Tibetan Book of the Dead and all these mysteries. Mm-hmm. And at the end, there is you find out that the whole island was created out of fear. There was this overarching, the twins. One twin became evil because he was greedy and the other one wanted good. Mm-hmm. And it's basically Adam and Eve, like the story of Adam and Eve that starts and playing out until now. Good and evil, and that's basically, I'm guessing, where Wetiko was born, out of necessity at the beginning of it.
Well, it's interesting, and there were all these theories. People are like, "Oh, was there like a collective trauma that happened centuries ago, or were there like negative ETs, or And first off, I'm convinced that the origin of Wetiko is, or at least from one point of view, is unhealed ancestral multi-generational trauma. That to the extent it's not metabolized, gets acted out and passed down, over the generations. And this is in line because I study the work of Jung so much. He talks about that evil regenerates itself over the generations, but that points to something. And that is that Wetiko, first of all, it's this dreamed up phenomenon that we are dreaming it up moment by moment. And, so to the extent that we're asleep to Wetiko, to the mind virus, we are then complicit we're participating in invoking it each and every moment. So the idea is that from that point of view, it's something that's getting regenerated and recreated in this moment and in this moment or not, So, that's, a very interesting contemplation about what is the origin of it, but it feeds back into quantum physics because quantum physics is saying there's only one moment, and it's the moment of observation, which is the moment of right now. And so right now, Wetiko is getting created by us if we're asleep in a certain way, or it's not getting created, and then that's a whole different universe.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's almost like if you're disconnected from your inner world and your whole angle of living is always external, Wetiko can exist in the subconscious.
Yeah. Well, the thing, what Wetiko does, it forces you, I call it, object referral. We put our attention outside of ourselves and we think the problem is out there. We think the solution is out there compared to having subject referral, which is to self-reflect. Yeah. And so what Wetiko does, it distracts us in such a way that we put our attention outside of ourselves.
Yeah, that's profound. I do think also there are certain players on Earth existing in physical bodies that know the secrets of And I was talking about Freud earlier and how people took his theories to
and weaponize them. Yeah.
Condition people to their subconscious world because, like you say, there was a separation at some point where we are disconnected from our subconscious parts of our brain, you know, we're just in the rational now. And there was a separation. And at that point, we are not whole anymore, right?
Right.
Like you need both to be whole.
Yeah.
But some people, in my perspective, are aware of the weakness of humanity, which is this disconnection, and are casting spells through, you know, ceremonial magic.
Yeah, or, you know, whatever. Yeah.
To take advantage and keep their position of kind of
power. Yeah.
Like I had a vision the other day of like, we are the ant colony. Most of humanity is just an ant colony doing the work, very efficient at doing the work until they realize that there's actually someone and like a human beside us that is kind of ability to influence what we're doing. But if you're too focused on the material, doing your little daily task, you forget that there's bigger force at play that exists that you can only perceive by listening to your inner world, your unconscious patterns. And these people know how to use their own will to create almost like on a macrocosmic scale, it would be like the currents of wind that exist on Earth. We have these currents going through our minds, and people that do magic can send these currents. So all of a sudden you wake up, you know, you're born and you have already a current pushing you in a specific direction until you awaken that you're actually following a trajectory that's not yours.
Yeah.
You're following these unconscious patterns until you find this curious spark, and you're like, hey, that's actually not the direction I feel comfortable in doing. And you go.
That's what happened to me. I was, you know, totally mainstream consensus reality, you know, and then, you know, the abuse, you know, with my father happened. And, you know, it was very, very traumatic, and it literally changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I really stepped out of consensus reality and, you know, followed my calling, you know, and that's very much like, you know, anybody who, you know, whatever, I think of like, you know, the shamanic archetype, you know, and the shaman, you know, we're all potential shamans in training. And the shaman is the creative artist. The shaman is the dreamer, the storyteller. You know, the shaman is the wounded healer. And I so identify and relate to that archetype. But it's not something you would ever do like voluntarily, like, oh, I'm going to be a shaman. You'd have to be out of your mind because the suffering is so intense. But if you're called to be a shaman, you know, by the spirits, by the powers of the unconscious, and if you don't assent, and you say, no, I can't do that. I'm not good enough, or I have other plans. Well, that's when you get really sick, you know? So it's really important if you're being called, and in a sense, we're all being called by the world. And they say in shamanism, you know, there are two of these dangers, these great dangers. I was with Michael Harner, you know, the guy he was one of the major Western shamans who wrote The Way of the Shaman. And he was telling me, he goes, yeah, there are two dangers in shamanism. One is, you know, somebody takes mushrooms and they have an experience. The next day they put out a shingle, oh, I'm a shaman. They can do incredible damage. The other danger is to, you know, just to stay unconscious to our intrinsic shamanic abilities. If we repress those, if we don't honor them, then we can also fall really, really sick. And so I point out that the shaman archetype, it's the major archetype that's activated in the collective unconscious right now, you know, in our world with the incredible insanity and darkness that's playing out. And that's what's needed more than anything and the shaman is the creative artist that, you know, connects to how profoundly important it is for each one of us to connect with our voice, with our creative voice.
That's so beautiful, and how it kind of helps me contextualize the direction my soul is bringing me, not just to my own work, but to how I want to empower people to tap into this creative power.
Right.
Which is the visionary power. And
right.
That's the thing, like I've noticed in the art world, in the contemporary art world, you know, the art you see in museums and the best galleries in the world, it has a certain intellectualism of it, but it lacks sometimes the heart-centeredness of visionary art. which the big differentiation is the why you're creating. Like, are you creating to sell, to please the collectors that know your work and that they're willing to spend a lot of money?
Yeah.
Are you really creating to bring out a mirror that will be so powerful that it will liberate something in people?
Yeah.
And the thing with this type of art is that you have to know the language of spirit to really, you can create it. A lot of artists are, shamans, and they just create art unconsciously, and they have difficulty understanding what they're doing creatively, because the language, it takes time to understand and to, the symbolism to analyze your dreams and everything. So I feel like that's also the place we're at collectively, is like the opening up of like visionary art as becoming something that is more mainstream, that is more accepted in the visionary art world. And not just like in a professional money-making way, but as a human, being able to create your life in an authentic way. And you will know, I feel like, when it's authentic, when it bears fruit that people can eat from.
Yeah.
In a way.
Well, and I just, as you're talking, I'm thinking, for me, why my books, it's such a creative project for me every time I write, because it would be one thing, if I know all this information and I just want to put it down, so that people can share it. But that's not fully it. It's like the act of writing is the very process through which I'm deepening my own realization of what it is I'm writing about. That, to me, is what makes it art. And then, the artifact, whether it's a book or whatever it is the person creates, if, from my point of view, if that's the spirit, that was informing the creative process, that artifact is imbued with that energy, that in a way it's contagious. It can actually, if somebody is open, it can transmit to the viewer, that same realization, in a sense, so that can go viral, that realization, that experience, that inspiration, that vision that the artist had, who created the work of art, can actually like transmit itself via the psyche to other people's, unconscious and or consciousness. And that can really, just like when with the alleged pandemic and, with COVID, it was supposedly, contagious. Well, this is, also contagious. This realization of the dreamlike nature, of our creative nature, of who we actually are. When somebody realizes that and they embody that, and they just can't help but to then transmit that and to express that, that can also go viral. That can be contagious, and that can inflame a global awakening. And that's readily available to us right now.
Yeah. And it feels like when you are heart-centered, as you're creating, as you're writing, every word and the structure of the word, almost like, the parables written in the Bible, like the people that wrote those sacred texts, they were very heart-centered, to the way that like the structure, the symmetry of how the phrases are done. There's almost an understructure, the superficial words that are linked together through sentences and grammar. There is another substructure of symmetry, of balance. And I think that's the power of like heart-centeredness, is that you're encoding works on an even deeper level than just the ink on the surface of the paper.
Yeah.
There is a poetry to the way you structure your sentences, to everything. And I think that's the power of heart-centered, is that it will speak to people, to their rational, when you read a word rationally, but also to the irrational part, the subconscious, just with the hidden structure that underlies. Yeah. That often is hard to become conscious of it as you're doing it, but if you're heart-centered, it naturally unfolds. The same with creative arts.
Yeah. Well, that being heart-centered in Buddhism, which I've been doing practice in Buddhism for a long time, the key thing is having an open heart, having a good heart, filled with love and compassion. That's really, what it's all about. And, you can have all the intellectual understanding in the world, but if your heart isn't open, then what's the point? you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what Wetiko does, it hardens your heart. It closes your heart, you know? Mm-hmm. And then when people who are really taken over by Wetiko, you know, they not only do they disconnect from their empathy and from their heart, but they become in a way programmed. They become like robots or automatons with no creativity, you know, programmed in. And that's why one of the ways to deal with Wetiko is for any one of us to become, indigenous people would say, a human being, to become in touch with our soul, in touch with our heart, in touch with our love and compassion and empathy, you know, that don't underestimate, you know, that the nuclear power of compassion, of love, compared to like when people really, because Wetiko, you see, it's a daimonic energy, which is to say it's a higher dimensional energy that can literally take over a person. So they will literally get possessed. Mm-hmm. And this is Jung. Jung says that our species, the human species, has been possessed for centuries, and it's in desperate need of an exorcism. And I see that. That's exactly what I'm talking about, because when Wetiko, and we all potentially have Wetiko, it exists in potential in the collective unconscious. I mean, who hasn't acted out their unconscious in a hurtful way towards themselves or others? We all have, right? So it's not like, oh, they have Wetiko and we don't. No, if you see from that point of view, then that's a sign that you've fallen under the thrall of Wetiko, you know? But the idea is to understand that there is this higher dimensional energy that can literally, it works through the blind spots of the unconscious, because it's a form of psychic blindness that believes that it actually is sighted. And not only, so it doesn't even know it's blind. And not only does it think it's sighted, it thinks it's more sighted than people who actually see, you know? So the idea being that when we get taken over by Wetiko, we in a sense become an instrument for this higher dimensional daimonic energy to come through us. And we just then become the conduit through which it acts itself out in the world. All the while we're oblivious to what's happened. We've never felt more ourselves when there's actually Castaneda, Don Juan in the Castaneda books calls it a foreign installation. Yeah, there's something, he calls it the predator. He didn't have the word Wetiko, but he was totally, you know, he actually said that it's the topic of topics, you know, and it's the most important thing to understand, and 100% true. If we don't recognize Wetiko and have the realization of what it's showing us, because it's a revelation, it's going to kill us. It's going to be the end of the human species. But yet it's so important. If Wetiko didn't exist, we would have to invent it, because it's actually catalyzing the evolution of our species. You see, it's a quantum phenomena. It contains in a superposition of states the greatest evil and the highest good. And well, is it going to take us down or is it going to wake us up? It all depends if we recognize it's a living revelation, if we recognize what it's revealing to us. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's so, I just want to say it can be kind of frustrating for me because, you know, I feel like I was just given this revelation and it's been 40 plus years, 24/7, trying to assimilate and, you know, trying to language it. And I guess it's a little bit frustrating because I feel a little bit ahead of my time, but I also feel like the time is quickly catching up and more people all over the world, or, you know, I get emails every day of like, oh, I read your work on Wetiko or on quantum physics, and oh my God, you found the words for what I didn't have words for. So more and more people are getting like, you know, really sort of psycho-activated would be the word. And so I'm grateful about that. But I just look forward to when it gets really more out into the vernacular, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine it must be a lonely journey to have, first of all, this, the catalyst, which was the pain.
Yeah.
But then you're given, you know, like a task, a life mission to promote it, understand it, transmute it within yourself so that you can explain it, you know, through your books. That must take a lot of, it must be kind of a lonely journey. I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm grateful that I have some really close friends who are also really fluent, and we just trip out on this all the time and help each other to deepen our realization. But no, it definitely is, you know, I mean, think about it. I have family living in the US right now. They haven't spoken to me for over 20 years. They just think, oh, we have this mentally ill relative who's in denial of his illness, you know, out in Portland, Oregon. And, you know, what can I do? What, you know, and, you know, so yeah, it's, you know, that's sort of part of the cost of following your vocation, because then you're stepping out of the collective, the group think,
Yeah. And I did see that on your chart also, like where Saturn is in the house of creativity, but it's also in the house of siblings.
Right.
And it brings some suffering linked to kind of I was going to ask you that actually, and I forgot, but this kind of a judgment that kind of isolates you just by judging you. Because with empathy is how you would open the door to your realm to understand you. But instead, since it's out of the norm, it's kind of, no, we're going to create a bubble around him and we're dissociating.
What happened, and it was, I think it's important. It's sort of the origin story of how I came across my work was, I'm an only child, and my father, he unwittingly, became totally possessed by Wetiko to the point where he was just an instrument for it. And I had no idea, I was just an ordinary kid. But it became problematic really when I was in college. So I developed a somewhat strong sense of ego and self and all that. And then once I began to separate and individuate from his version of who I thought I was supposed to be, I was going to be the doctor or lawyer. And then in college, I realized, no, I'm a creative artist. And he did everything he could to obliterate that impulse in me, but he didn't realize because it was the true creative, spirit, it can't be kept down for very long. It would find a way to emerge. And so, but in essence, that was the abuse that I suffered. And there's a whole story. There's a whole 600-page book I wrote about it because it was so intense. But the point is that at a certain point, I began to realize, oh my God, there's like this evil energy coming through my father. And I was, just very innocently pointing at it so that we can, heal as a family. And I couldn't believe that me doing that then made everybody saw me as I was the evil one and I was the problem. And if only Paul would just stop saying these terrible things about his father, everything would be okay. And that's when I began to realize over the years, oh, this is actually this revelation that I was beginning to recognize that how the non-local field was configuring itself to protect the abuser. And I realized that's a deeper dynamic, that when you bring in light to a family system, into a world, or into your own mind, it's going to constellate the darker powers to try to obscure that light. And, so that was really the beginning of the revelation that over 40 plus years, I've been more and more like, finding the words for and metabolizing and integrating, and without that experience of the abuse, that it totally killed my entire family. I haven't had a family for decades now. I would never have had the authority to write my books on evil, I
see what you mean. It gave you the strength, like you have nothing to lose in a way. So just follow your path.
Yeah, I became the identified patient. I became, Paul's the one who's sick. Paul's the one who's evil. Paul's the one who's crazy, and I was so young. I had no understanding of any of that. But somehow I had enough love or courage or something to be able to get through, because my entire universe at a certain point was reflecting back, oh, you have this chemical imbalance, you're mentally ill, and you're going to need to be on medication the rest of your life. And I'm just thinking, wow, they're idiots. They have no idea what's happening. And that's what saved me. It couldn't have been more clear to me from inside my own mind that I was having an awakening. I was recognizing the dreamlike nature. I was realizing, wow, we're not separate. It just could not have been more clear to me. And that's what saved me, from buying into other people's version of myself as, whatever, as bipolar or manic. And now I have psychiatrists who are clients of mine and pay me money. So it's come full circle. It's kind of so amazing and healing. But it was not easy way back in the day.
But that's a beautiful story to share, because for anyone that's going through these hardships in the moment, there's so much suffering on us right now. It is a beautiful message to see. If you get to delve into the Wetiko, understand it, and then you get to put in perspective everything you're experiencing in a new lens, it helps to see more clearly, but also to see why it's necessary to remain authentic to your own experience and continue moving in the direction that you're feeling the call to do amongst the challenges and the pain.
Yeah.
Because on the other side of it, there is more peace, hopefully. And also, I think the peace comes when you find connection again with others. Like if you've been isolated, you feel like you're suffering. But as you're opening up, I feel, and you understand that you are not separate from others, it kind of releases the burden, because then your burden, your pain is also a collective pain.
Yeah, but that's a key moment, because when so many people have a tendency to personalize our own pain and think, well, I'm really screwed up, or I have a problem. And this connects back to the shaman, because the shaman, what do? They take on the illness of the client or the community or the world. Taking on has a double meaning. It means to have it out with, to wrestle with it, but it also means to take it within oneself. So you actually, like the shaman, by taking on the illness, they fall ill. They experience it inside their own subjectivity. And if they stay ill, then they can't be of any benefit. Then they're going to need a healer. But the idea is they take that occasion of falling ill and they find their way back to their wholeness, back to their nature. And then they integrate that illness. And by doing that energetically, non-locally, it helps the other person, the original person or community who is suffering from it. And so the idea being is, instead of personalizing our suffering, you can recognize, what I'm suffering as a microcosm in my own individual person is a reflection of the very illness and the very suffering that's happening collectively. And when you recognize that, all of a sudden you have a deeper context. It's like, oh, wow, that means I'm not separate from everyone, and that's a major part of the healing right there, because you've snapped out of the separate self.
Yeah. And then you can actually, like you say, create medicine out of this poison.
Yeah. And that's alchemy. And that's what we're all like being asked to do. And I see more and more over the decades, that's what I'm doing. I was just given, it was like, without going into the story, with the abuse from my father, it was like my boundaries just got completely violated energetically. And I got like a transfusion of the very evil that had taken over my father came into me. And the next day that after this happened, I had a fever for a year. There was nothing physically wrong, and then at the end of that year of the fever, then that same unbelievably evil seeming entity that had taken over my father was now living inside of me. And it was like getting bit by a vampire, and it wanted to make me its host, just like it made my father its host. And my process more and more has been to like alchemically transmute that poison, that evil, into medicine, into my work. And, and that's why I have to do what I do. If I don't create or connect with my creative process every day, I don't feel well.
So you would say that this spell or poison is still in you until, like it's an ongoing process to this day.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a work in progress. Totally. Absolutely. No, and, but I'm thankful that instead of just having it like take me down or stop me or make me feel stuck or, it hasn't been fun. There are plenty of years people would ask me how I'm doing, and I would just in a joking way say, well, just imagine what fun is and then take the opposite of that. That's how I'm doing, because I was fated to wrestle with this, in my dreams night after night, I would be being taught about what I was like engaging with. And, but no, it's a work in progress, but I'm really happy that, I've built up the muscle, the psychic muscle more and more of, instead of just, sort of splitting and disassociating from the pain or from the evil, I'm able to tap into it in a way where it becomes the fuel for the most incredible, like revelatory, visionary insights and creativity that, I hopefully informs my work,
Interesting. So it is not a fun life that you chose or that your soul chose, but it is a very necessary one for the collective. Like we're I'm very happy you exist, because it is an abstract thing, but if no one did this, the darkness would just kind of remain. I see it almost like a veil of darkness that overlaps, like a quilt that overlaps.
Yeah. Well, it's very much like our species. It's like we're in a fairy tale, and like, the population has fallen under a spell. Mm-hmm. And, to whatever degree I've woken up out of the spell, to whatever degree I have, and every day I fall back in, just like in a dream, you can have a lucid dream, and then you get absorbed back in the forms of the dream, and then you wake up again to that you're dreaming, and it's like an ongoing process. And for me, the question is, because, as the incredible propaganda that is like pervading, our world, and all the lies, and, the mind control. And so the question for me becomes, how do we wake people up, so that they snap out of the spell? And, part of the spell is like, the separate self, or, the fundamental part of the spell is the separate self, and then fear, and then in the apocryphal text, because I mentioned, they talk about Wetiko. It's called the counterfeiting spirit. And, it's a master impersonator. And the thing about Wetiko, it can't steal our soul, but it tricks us into giving our soul away. And then what it does, it offers us a fictitious version of ourselves. Like I was saying, you're wounded and traumatized. And so then this counterfeiting spirit, it wants us to identify with who we're not. When we do that, we forget who we actually are. Then by doing that, we disconnect from our creative power and agency. And then that's a recipe for madness, what I'm just describing. And, that's our situation. That's the diagnosis that's happening individually and collectively, writ large on the world stage in the greater body politic. So then the question becomes, how do we as visionary artists intervene in that dreaming process in a way that's going to help people to wake up?
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of like I have visions. I don't know how the visions you get or the insights come to you. For me, it's very visual. Like I see, that's what I translate in my paintings in visual form. But one of them that really is aligned with what you're saying just now, it's like I was a pair of eyes in the astral realm. So just in this empty space that exists in the subconscious realm, and there was a kind of bubble around it, like a ceiling that's just blocking energy, almost like a dome. On top of the dome, there was a little opening, and there was what I would say a parasitic entity that was just on where there's the entrance.
Yeah.
And I see the visions, and then I get all these kind of clear knowing, what is it called? When you just know things just by seeing it.
Yeah.
And for me, what I saw is like this dome represents institutions, regardless if it's like religious institutions, academic institutions. We are governed almost like this vision, the Wetiko would govern us through institutions. And the institutions have each like this master archon or this parasite that knows that above this dome of falsehood,
freedom.
There's light.
Right.
And they have like there was the vision of having a little dropper. And so they keep you in this kind of Maya, this illusion where you're not sure what's going on. And for the deep seekers like us that are, I know there's more. I'm going to go to this philosophy, to this religion, and I'm going to try to find this answer. And they have this dropper, and they're like, here's a little drop of light. You've done, because otherwise you're going to awaken. So we're going to give you just a little, so you touch it, and then you're satisfied. And then if you continue 30 years later, a little more drop, instead of just having access to the full spectrum of light. As I'm speaking it, I'm just realizing that there is also a reason for that, like that they exist, because our nervous system is not made to receive all that light.
Right.
So it's good that we're giving it droplet by droplet, but now it's been kind of taken over by these parasitic forces that will control us and give us, even though our system is now adapted to receive more light, they won't give us more.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting what you're sharing. And I just appreciate that you had that vision because, I have like every day I just have deeper revelatory visions, which, then connect over time and become my next book or whatever it is. And one way I conceive of what happened to me. So in 1981, based on this incredible trauma and pain and suffering, and I went so deeply into my own mind just by assuming the position of the witness and just watching, and that, I got hit by a bolt of lightning, not from the sky, but in my brain. Mm-hmm. It's like my Kundalini just ignited, and that's, what started my vocation. Mm-hmm. And I knew then, and I know now that all I needed, like in indigenous cultures, they would have recognized, because I began acting I was so excited at what I was realizing. Oh, we're having a dream and we're all dream characters and there's no separate self. But I was like 24. I wasn't prepared for it. And I immediately, within, that day got thrown in hospital and diagnosed and medicated and the whole thing, because from mainstream point of view, it looked like I'd had a radical personality change, a psychotic break. But indigenous cultures would understand, oh, he might be being called. He might be a would-be healer and shaman, and they would have, supported me. But what I'm wanting to transmit is, from one point of view, I was breaking free of the matrix. Mm-hmm. And it was like the darker powers, through their non-local connections, were like, oh, somebody's breaking free. We got to make sure he doesn't get liberated. So they, all of a sudden they put me in psychiatry, drugged me, diagnosed me. My parents took to their dying breath that I was mentally ill. They died 20 years after that, because in their mind, psychiatrists were authority figures, and all the psychiatrists were in agreement. Oh, yes, your son has this chemical imbalance, And by the way, and I write about this in my memoir, that the same psychiatrist who authored the DSM-3, which had come out the year before my awakening, which had announced the discovery of the chemical imbalance, the same psychiatrist came out. I have the quotes. And they said, oh, by the way, we confess, we made that up. There's no such thing as a chemical imbalance. The pharmaceutical companies made us do that to sell more drugs and make more money. Oh. And, so everybody, they go, any psychiatrist who's still using the chemical imbalance, they don't know what they're talking about, but yet it's a meme that so many people still talk about a chemical imbalance, And so every single psychiatrist, when I had my awakening, was telling me I had this newly discovered chemical imbalance. And as they were diagnosing me, I was diagnosing them as being, just morons. It was interesting, that conception about, I was breaking free, and then the evil powers that are non-locally connected made sure we got to make sure that he doesn't get fully liberated. Mm. But I also see the perfection of that, because it would have saved me so much suffering if people would have recognized, oh, Paul's actually having an awakening. This is a healthy process. He's not pathological. We just need to support him. He needs a few months to integrate what he's realizing. That's all I needed. But there was a perfection to that not happening, and me getting brutalized and tortured by psychiatry, where it just destroyed, my family. It almost destroyed me, because that was part of my initiation. In a sense, that was my descent into the underworld, was my encounter with psychiatry. I never would have believed the insanity, that the incredible abuse that plays out in psychiatry.
Because you're rising being Libra, you have very polar things in your chart. Libra is the opposite of a sense of self, but you have a sun in Leo, which is a real sense of self, the real solar spiritual identity. And it's almost like it forced you to get rid of all the little lines that were making you connect with this false sense of I, so that now you would be the bigger I, which is the which is the everything else. So that, but always being guided, because Jupiter is with your sun, always for beneficial reasons. It's not destruction by evil. It's almost like the good destroyed you, but so that you could become a messenger for them almost.
Yeah.
That's how I would perceive it. And to come back to what you just said, it's very synchronistic, like at the last solar eclipse, and lunar eclipse, because they happen every 2 weeks apart, which is about a month ago. I had a similar experience of a lightning bolt flashing through my spine and bolt of energy, all these visions, all these downloads. Next day, I fall ill. I'm never ill. I felt big fever, lower back pain. For like a whole week, I was in bed. And at the same time, almost unconsciously, I spilled my matcha drink over my computer. Fucked forever.
Oh, wow.
I went to 3 different people to repair it. And I vlogged it all because it was so synchronistic and so weird how it was timed. They were trying to repair. They're like, yeah, we can do it. Delays. Can't do it. Bring it somewhere. Okay, we can. Anyways, it lasted for like a month and a half until last week where I bought this new computer. But it was like the universe telling me like, you broke down. Your whole immune system broke down. The computer is like the intellect. It's like your preconceived ideas of yourself that you intellectualize was metaphorized with my computer.
Right.
That broke down. And until I could acknowledge it through like the whole vlog and kind of trying to understand it and going deeper with tarot, different things, until I figure this out. And then the solution comes once you figure this out, and then everything gets resolved. And it's very synchronistic that a week later, then I'm on the road back because I'm flying to New York Monday, and I'm reading your book. And then I realize that you live right where I'm going to be, and you cross path, and this kind of synchronistic moment happens, like not randomly, obviously.
Yeah.
But I do relate with that system. I think your flash up, your thunderbolt was stronger perhaps, and then the breakdown after that was even more deep. But I had, let's say, a fraction of that I can relate to how these transformations seems to happen. Like the Kundalini energy can only receive a certain amount of pure light at the time without it breaking down.
Yeah, totally. No, absolutely.
And then it's almost a grace of God to not give it to you all at the same time.
Yeah, no, what would happen to me, I'm aware that there was so much energy, that got unleashed when that lightning bolt came into my brain, that I'm fortunate that it didn't kill me. I mean, because that's when all these miracles began happening. And, and I don't talk about them because of, I've just been guided not to talk about them, but I also realized, oh my God, I'm fortunate to have come out of that alive because, it's like, the normal human being, or like say we're like these light bulbs and we're 60 watts and this was like a quadrillion watts and could have completely fried me, and somehow it didn't.
Were you doing meditation?
Yeah. I was doing about 4 hours a day of intense Vipassana meditation for a couple of years. And and then the other parts of the day I was studying, I was in my early 20s. So, and why I was doing that, the only thing I found that was alleviating my suffering was meditation, because any sort of I was going to therapy, I was studying, nothing was touching the suffering, but assuming the position of the witness and sort of detaching from the contents of my mind, that was helping, however slightly it was, but it was helping. So that's why I was doing the Vipassana so seriously, and then what happens when you do it every day, consistently that many hours a day, is the rest of the day, you're just in the habit of also being really, really, really mindful. And I don't know if you know about, within hours of that lightning bolt, that's when I met this blind woman. Do you know that story?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, this is the one, you see there were all over the next almost couple of years, unbelievable miracles happened, but I can't talk about them. But this was the one experience I was given permission from my inner guidance to talk about. So I get hit by this bolt of lightning. Within 24 hours, I'm brought by ambulance. I'm in the Bay Area to Highland Hospital, Oakland, California, May 1981. It's a little bit after dinner time, and I get brought into my first psychiatric hospital, and they lead me in, and they put me into this lounge where, all the psych patients, they just had dinner, and I see this woman, And she's an older woman and she's blind. You know, her eyes are opaque. And I'm in this completely exalted, you know, state of realizing this is a dream. And, you know, it was like I was having realization, you know, and stuff was happening. You know, like I say, I can't talk about, but it was like, oh my God, this is what everyone is dreaming about. And it was happening to me. And then I see this blind woman, and without even thinking about it, I just walk right up to her. And, you know, her eyes are opaque. And like I was given a script, all of a sudden I spontaneously start saying the words, all you have to do to see is open your eyes and look. Kept on repeating the words, kept on getting closer to her, kept on looking in her eyes. Whole thing took not even a minute. She regained her sight in front of my eyes. And as if it was choreographed, at that moment they come and they take me up and they strap me on a bed, you know, where I spent the night. And, you know, needless to say, I didn't sleep that night. I'm tripping out over what just happened. And then the next morning they unstrap me. They put me in a room. You know, I'm in the psych ward, and who's the only other person sitting on the other side of the desk is this ex-blind woman. And she's smiling at me from ear to ear, not saying a word. And all of a sudden my heart chakra just blossoms. You know, I never had that experience so clearly. And I understood, oh, I get it. She had hysterical blindness. She was like inwardly not letting herself look, and that was manifesting as her outer blindness. And she was ready to heal. And I was like the Uber driver that got called in because I was like in the area, and they just needed somebody to say the lines that she would hear to help her to heal her self-induced blindness. And by the way, Wetiko is a self-induced hysterical form of blindness. This is what Christ is saying in the Bible. People have eyes and don't see. People are closing their eyes so they don't see the light. He's describing Wetiko, right? Then she says to me, the only word she ever said to me, she goes, aren't you going to answer the phone call from, and she mentions my father's name. And then within like 5 seconds, the nurse comes in the room and says, Paul, your father's on the phone, because my parents had just gotten word I had a psychotic break. And now that experience saved my life, because then for the next, you know, from then on, every doctor and my parents and everybody was telling me, oh, you're mentally ill. And when you have an experience like that, you know that something is going on that's really profound. You know, so that was the start. That from that experience on, that changed the whole trajectory of my life. And within days, so I got out of that hospital after 3 days, because the doctor in charge of me, he reflected back to me, you have to convince me you're not crazy, or I'm going to keep you here a really long time. And I heard that, and I just began, I became normal and just began talking about my problems and my father and the abuse, and he let me go. He let me out, and after 3 days, and then I knew something had happened. So I knew I had to find somebody to talk to, and I found out there was a Theravada monk from Burma, from Myanmar now, who lived in San Francisco. And I went to tell him what happened. And he says to me, oh, you're in luck. The greatest Buddhist master of all of Burma, this 85-year-old great master, his picture is right up there on the window, Tangpulu Sayadaw. He just arrived in town. You should get his blessing. So I went and got his blessing, and I didn't understand it. We had this incredible connection. And he later told his main disciple and translator, who is a Buddhist nun, who also became my teacher. She was also a great enlightened being. She told me years later, a number of times, oh, and my guru met you. He says to me, he's not crazy. He's, having some form of, spiritual awakening and all that. So anyways, that, but over that next year and a half or 2 years, maybe 3, 4, 5 other times I was hospitalized, because I was just a free agent out in the world. I wasn't in like an ashram or a monastery. And every time I got, oh, you're manic depressive, you're crazy. Because all I needed, like I was saying, was just people to recognize that I was having a genuine life transforming spiritual awakening, and just to be supported and taken care of. And then I could have easily have integrated it over a few months, but that's not what happened,
It feels like the story of the blind woman. I think it's a very powerful on multiple levels.
Yeah.
But like the thing with the Kundalini, it feels like it's activating your third eye vision. Which is the spiritual vision. And that's what I'm seeing as you're describing. This is almost like the third eye vision is what allows you to see Wetiko, you know? So you see through the veil that is the 3D physical reality. So because you just had this experience, you could perceive the invisible space inside of her aura almost, and you knew exactly what's the light.
But it wasn't even me who was seeing it. That's the thing. I appreciate what you were saying, but there was no sense of identification with like, oh, I was seeing this thing. No, it was like I was just completely like a hollow bone. I was just like a totally open instrument that one way, and I appreciate you saying it's like a very multidimensional thing, you know, experience, because it was like healing wanted to happen in the field. Her eyes wanted to heal. And I was just open and available for like, you know, and then I just got dreamed up to pick up whatever role was needed to help the healing that was wanting to happen. And that maps on to our situation as a species, that there's healing that's wanting to happen in the field. And the question for each one of us, what is our role? How can we offer ourselves and step in to being an instrument to facilitate the healing that's wanting to happen?
And that is what you've just mentioned is something I've been focused on for the past year specifically, is how to become more selfless. What are the tools we can integrate in our lives to dilute our ego so that the intuitive faculties can be directly channeled to us and make us act on it without resistance? Which is what you were in the fully blossomed version when your sense of eye is.
My whole work was holographically encoded in that event with the blind woman, because in essence, what I'm basically saying in all my books is all we have to do to see is open our eyes and look. You know, instead of seeing ourselves through how others see us or through how we imagine others see us, what about like the radical idea of seeing out of our own eyes, you know?
Yeah, and it is that's why you have the exalted sun in Leo with Jupiter, because you have this grace that is using your soul to bring. If it was Saturn there, it would be the opposite. It would try to tame, but it's Jupiter. It wants to expand the grace of God through your soul. So naturally, the more you abandon yourself, your identity of self, your ego, which is the Wetiko, the more spirit is unlocking doors and everyone around you that you meet, you know, just by your
it's
presence.
so interesting because I write every morning, like I was writing my next book this morning. And when I write it, whatever, you know, piece I've written that morning, then say at night, I'll read what I've written and I'll be like, wow, this is really good. Who wrote this? Because there's not any identification with that I was the writer. It just felt like I was an open instrument and some other energy, you know, was coming through.
That's Virgo and Mercury in the 12th house. It is a non-local. Like something takes your.
No, it feels like that. Because what happens in the morning when I wake up before I start writing, you know, I'm brushing my teeth and I'm getting downloads. And I'm like realizing, you know, and then I realize like I've learned to distinguish between like just, you know, the sort of you could say monkey mind, the neurotic I need to just ignore, compared to when I'm getting a download, there's a different energetic signature, and then I need to pay attention. And then I'm just in the role of an employee, and I'm getting dictates from the boss, and it's showing me what I'm going to write about it, or it's connecting dots, or it's, you know, and then that's what inspires my writing.
I think that's so valuable. Can you describe what is the qualities of this difference?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So I think we're all familiar when we're just in our neurotic monkey mind, you know, there's a certain energy that is just not productive at all. And it takes our life force and our creative spirit and it drains it. Or we can easily just feel like in a samsaric feedback loop that just endlessly reinforces itself. When I get that download, it feels like I'm having a dream. And I'm like, oh wow. Just like, you know, when you have a dream, if you don't like, you know, coagulate it and write it down or record it, it'll vaporize. So it's like this little like dreamette is what I call it. And they're very easy just to not notice because they're very ephemeral. But I've trained myself because just cultivating, mindfulness, that, oh, wow, I just noticed that was an interesting connection there. I hadn't thought about that before. And then, you see, because one of the things in alchemy, they talk about, there's all these different stages, and one of the stages is coagulation, where you take the vision, the dream, the imagination, and you turn it into earth. That's where the creative artist comes in,
Yeah. I can see that, because I know like the quality you just described, for me, the challenge is like, if I'm in meditation, I'll know, because I'm open and I'm just looking up there, I'm looking for this subtle thought forms. But in my daily life, sometimes I do have them, but like you say, they're so soft, so subtle, so light that they're easily kind of blended in with, like, you're driving and it's like you move to another thought, you see something. So it's just a very good reminder, because my spirit does talk to me this way, and I'm sure it talks to many people this way, but we just don't pay attention. So to put the emphasis on that is very useful.
Yeah, and it brings up something too. It's like, I was talking before about the hidden treasure tradition of Tibet, that there are these hidden treasures encoded, in the multidimensional fabric of the universe. And another, sort of way of thinking about that, there are treasures hidden within the psyche, that when the time is right, or when we meet, just like in a dream, you're in a dream, you don't realize you're dreaming, and something will happen. And, Philip K. Dick calls it a disinhibiting signal. I'll call it like this lucidity stimulator. Something will happen. Somebody will say something. You'll see a book or whatever, and boom, you'll become lucid. You'll recognize the nature of your circumstance. And the same thing in our lives. Something will happen. It could even be somebody hearing these very words in this very moment, and it opens up, their mind, like in the Terma tradition, the hidden treasure tradition. They will say, some people who discover termas, they will see one syllable on a page, and that syllable will open up 20 volumes of text that were hidden, concealed within their minds. And so that's very interesting, that there are these hidden treasures within our psyche. And if we cultivate that mindfulness and that openness, then we can connect with them and then bring them forth into the world. And if they're real treasures, you see, the thing about these hidden treasures in Tibet, they're meant to be shared, and they're a dreamed up phenomena. So say if the community is getting one-sided, or their practice is getting stale, or they've fallen asleep in a certain way, all of a sudden the community there'll be a terma discovered. The community dreams up a terma, a hidden treasure. And then the person who discovers it, though, they can't just like share it. No, if it's a practice, if it's, they have to do the practice until they attain the blessing and they attain the realization. Then they embody, they're embodying the term, and then they're empowered to share it, So in the same way, if we discover, like, there's a treasure hidden in our mind, and then if we really take it in and creatively express it and integrate it, then, in whatever form we're transmitting it, that then becomes empowered to like activate other people's psyche.
That's beautiful. And the metaphor for that in astrology is the same. The sun is a metaphor for God that connects everything, the grid. And God, like, has, for me, from my recent studies, is divided in two, because we live in this physical reality, the void and the positive light. But it's almost like if you don't transmute the codes, and the codes, what I was going to say is the codes, depending on the angle of the sun when you're born, the exact hour is almost its specific quality of light that happens just one moment per year. And every year the sun is a bit different, because there's a precession of the equinox that happens. So every human soul that incarnates has a specific angle of God. It's almost like the qualities that float in your head that you can bring down, alchemize, and share, they will be connected with that specific angle. It's a medicine that only you can carry from your incarnation. And if everyone would do that, God would be omnipresent. And therefore Wetiko would have no more place. But this is the creative aspect, like you're saying, of transmuting it and creating something with it. To create authentically, it has to be digested. You cannot.
Exactly. It has to be digested. Right. No, absolutely.
And I'm curious to finish. You said you wrote, I'm curious to see how this will done. This morning you said you wrote something like every morning. Is there something in there that you would like to share?
Well, I was writing on, about my next book, about the reality of the psyche. And in essence, it's a book about the work of Jung. Jung saved my life because, so I get out of the last hospital in 82 was the last hospitalization. And everybody in my universe was telling me I'm mentally ill, and I knew I wasn't. And I was like, in my mid-20s, very young, trying to understand what had happened to me. And then I came across the work of Jung, and right away, I recognized, oh my God, there's a chapter in his autobiography, Confrontation with the Unconscious, and he describes these experiences. And I realized, oh my God, here's somebody who actually had similar experiences to me and is articulating them. So it made me feel not crazy type of thing. And so then I just began studying Jung. I've been studying Jung now over 40 years. I've never taken a course, but I teach Jung to Jungian analysts and to Jung societies. I'm really, very, very steeped in it. And so one thing about what I was writing about this morning was just like, I consider him one of the great geniuses of all time. And, and one of the things that I love about, he was very switched on to Wetiko. He didn't have the name, he called it totalitarian psychosis. He called it a number of different names. That was one of the main names he used. And, but he also very much was like emphasizing the reality, not just of the psyche, but of evil. And he wasn't talking metaphysical, but he was talking psychological, that there's an evil factor that is disintegrating to a person in which, think about addiction, when we act out stuff that's actually destroying us, and he was, again and again emphasizing the importance of really shedding light on evil. He famously said the way to become enlightened isn't by just imagining figures of light, but by shedding light on the darkness. And in a sense, that's what my work is about. And that's what I was writing about this morning, and I'm quoting Jung a million times over, trying to really bring forth, his genius, that he was so far ahead of his time. He talked about, he goes, modern psychology, where they just try to change your behavior or just like give you pharmaceuticals. He goes, it's a psychology without the psyche, and so he was really bringing in the profundity of the psyche, and the psyche really is the psychological correlate to the quantum.
But would you say, because when I hear psyche, there's a deity, Psyche, I think in certain tradition, Psyche is also equated to the soul. And I think the difference between his first teacher, Freud, and Jung is that Jung saw the unidimensionality of Freud's teachings, while Jung had a multitude of dimensional understanding of things. And I connected with the chakra system. It's almost like Freud was describing very well the second chakra reality of our existence.
Right.
But Jung understood that there was different dimensions to who we are, and brought a lot more complexities that make us our human, right? We're not just one dimensional.
Yeah, totally.
So,
no, and he was very much into the non-locality of the psyche, that it's not contained in third dimensional space and time, and, which then connects the dot to him bringing synchronicity, and, that mind and matter, these cosmic principles that seem totally opposite were actually indistinguishable and not separable. Yeah. It was like when I found his work, and I study it every day. I have everything he's ever written. I've read it a million times. And when I found his work, it was like, oh, he wrote these words just for me type of thing, because I was struggling with trying to understand what I'd fallen into. And so when I found Jung, and it was very synchronistic how I found Jung, and then I got hired by the Jung Foundation back in New York to run their bookstore and be the advertising, manager of their journal. And I just can't say enough about Jung and about how important his work is.
But it's funny because I filmed a podcast with a visionary artist 2 weeks ago in Los Angeles. She's a 75-year-old woman that has been hermiting most of her life. And for 3 years straight, she was almost in a trance, in visions. And she described the same thing as you. She's like, Jung was my best friend. I was so isolated. No one understood me. But I felt like Jung understood me. And I was dialoguing with him through his books. I feel like in the same way that your medicine to the world is your books, Jung's was the medicine for you. But for many visionary artists that are experiencing this out of the norm realities.
Right. You know? Yeah. No, totally. And so this book really, and it makes perfect sense now that, my next book is all about Jung, because I quote Jung, a lot through all of my work, but I've never written a book just about Jung. And, that's what I'm doing. That's what I was writing this morning.
It dawns on me like the psyche, when someone says the word psyche, I imagine always like the head, the intellect. But when I go deeper in the feeling of the word psyche, I see the spine with the 7 chakras. Right. Is the whole spectrum of energy that we can tap into as human beings.
Yeah. And he talks about that in his work on Psyche. Yeah, he correlates it to the chakras and all of that. No, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And, I think this ends well. Like, I think Jung is as much as your books are such powerful tools to, and I recommend everyone just take one of your books and read it at your pace because it has so much, for me, everything I've been working on internally, kind of like you were saying, like all the people that's writing to you about how your book opened them up to the realities they've been feeling. It's really like that. It's like you describe something that I've felt, basically. And in this way, seeing the shadow is the way to integrate it in a way.
Yeah.
And so I really thank you for your book, but also for your time today and the grace you have to give me this time for, I don't know, we went so deep in so many nuances that I think even for me, I'm going to take away a lot of how to connect with my spirit. And because it's such a fine quality, a fine energy that sometimes in this physical matter we live in, it's hard to understand. But through these conversations, it really enlightens me to put words on it. So,
great. Thank you. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I'm looking forward to that new book. Do you have the title already?
Yeah, I mean, it's called Jung's Reality of the Psyche, the greatest psychological discovery that no one's ever heard of. Because if you ask people about the reality of the psyche, they go, what? And like even less people even know what it means. So, yeah.
And do you have an idea when you think it's going to be fully hatched?
Yeah, I mean, it might take another maybe 12 months of just writing, which I've been doing. But, it's a lot of it's already come through. But I'm just giving it a year of writing and then, probably a year or two after that, because the whole publishing process takes a good year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and the second part, I have something I want. Since you mentioned Jung, I have a Jungian tarot.
Oh, great!
So I want to try something with you. So that'll be in the second part after the break.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this was as informative and as beautiful as it was for me to have this conversation with him. Go check out his links and his books. He is from Oregon, I believe. So you can find, I'm sure, lots of conferences that he's giving in that area. I think he also gives classes that you can follow, like group classes. So go check that on his website. And don't forget, there's less than 2 weeks left to apply to the Visionary Rose gift. So if you're an artist and you have not yet completed your application, go do it now. And check out our merch. The link is below. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you next week for this second part where Paul Levy is actually going to give us very practical tools and share his meditation that involves the energy of the lapis lazuli. I'll leave it like this, very enigmatic, but he shares something he does every day for many years that has been very useful for him. And we also do since he's really into Jungian psychology, I brought my Jungian tarot deck, and we're gonna have him pick a card and interpret it for us and see what it evokes for him. So that's next week on Monday. In the meantime, I love you guys. See you next week.